Welcome, listeners, to the Master Your Money show, where we're looking at how to accelerate your business and get in control of your finances to make the most of them there. And we've got a very special guest on today. We've got James Tuckerman here. James, just want to thank you for being on the show.
Hey, mate. Thank you very much. Good to see you. A fellow Aussie crushing it in the USA. Well done.
That's right. Thanks, James. Now, James is an entrepreneur, angel investor. He actually runs all sorts of marketing training. He's run one of Australia's biggest publishing brands, Anthill Magazine, and has been a personal mentor of mine in the marketing of my business. So I know that James has so much to offer you as viewers through the marketing side, through the finance side. So we're going to try and cram in as much as we can for the half an hour while we're here. So James, again, look, there's so much I know you can bring to the show. I'd love for you to tell us what is it that you're currently focused on right now?
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, my entrepreneurial journey, as you mentioned, started off with something old school, and that was a magazine made of paper and ink. And I learned a lot of stuff about business developing that, because I started that as a 26-year-old in my home country, Australia, and grew that into one of Australia's leading business magazines. Then the GFC came. Steve Jobs invented the iPad. Google AdWords appeared, Facebook ads. People expected more from their advertising, and it was the perfect storm for magazines. Reinvented the business into a 100% digital business. Everyone wanted to know how we did it. Became like a marketing consultant because of that. This is the nature of entrepreneurship, isn't it? And now my main venture, my biggest and fastest growing venture, is something called the B2B School. And it's training and coaching for business-to-business owners. So if you run a business that services another business, it's sales and marketing. And that there currently has a reach of about 72,000 business operators across the globe, as well as a reasonably vast social media reach. But it's funny that you asked me to have this conversation with you, Josh, because we obviously talk a lot about sales and marketing. But I just want to put this out first and foremost, is that I am possibly one of the worst role models anyone can have when it comes to managing their personal finances. But I hope that I might be able to offer some advice to help people avoid many of the mistakes that I have made. Having said that,
I'm sure it will.
Having said that, I have managed to continuously run my own businesses for 15 years, so I can't be getting it all wrong.
Yeah. I'm sure there's so much experience right in there. So yeah, that's great. And maybe in getting into that, looking at the B2B school, you talked about that being your newest venture or your main venture. Like, why do you do that? What's the why behind that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, like, there are all sorts of things there are all sorts of different reasons why we end up where we are. And I think that before we began speaking, you said, I might ask you, you're remembering your first experience with money.
Yeah.
And my brain immediately went back to my mum gave me some money to buy my dad, I think it must have been a Father's Day present. And that was my first experience that I can remember with money. Someone gave me money, and I spent that on somebody else. And I remember that being an amazing feeling. So my experiences with money might be a little bit different to some. I can't say I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, but I can't say that we ever had it tough. Which means that money was never like one of those issues in our household. And I'm sure that you've spoken to a lot of people where when they were growing up, money was a big issue in their household and it framed things. It never was a big issue. So for my big problem in my entire life is that I've generally been not so worried about money and probably a little bit generous. So back to this particular business, the reason why this particular business has grown and flourished and done so well so quickly is I think that perhaps is that I get a kick out of helping people and I get a kick out of seeing the results that they get. Indeed, I have a philosophy that I've been applying since the very early days of the business called be the cure. Be the cure. And that simply means that if you can help someone and it's not going to harm you, help them. Yeah. It's great for marketing. It's great for the growth of a business. It's great for personal self-esteem. But in terms of like sales and marketing and growing a business, one of the best things that you can do is be helpful. And I seem to have found a business model where we can be helpful, we can guide people, we can help them on their own journeys, and also make good money out of it, which is a pretty good combination. So that's why it seems that this one seems to be the focus right now.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, I've done some of your training before around marketing, and I love the practicality around it too. I also love that you really kind of focus on helping people get the best value out of what they're investing in. And putting on the show, I really wanted to pull those things together, what people do with their finances, with how to grow their business. And I really like that you found the right little kind of tweaks, or the best software, or the best way to go about things to grow your business from a few different directions. Tell us about how that kind of has come together, and why that's such a kind of key part of what you do for training other business people.
Well, what I can say is while I've never really been totally stressed about money, I am a cheapskate. And that comes about the first venture, Anthill Magazine. So I moved back home with my mum and dad, and moved into my sister's old bedroom, which is the office, with the Wham posters on the walls, ADSL connection. This is how long ago it was, 15 years ago. An ADSL connection would give you phone, fax, and internet, because fax was important. That's how we got paid. That was the early days of internet. A fax would come in with someone's credit card details written on it. But early days, I had the first edition of the magazine was going to cost $40,000 to produce. And I went, that's all right, because I'm going to make $40,000 in advertising sales. And we ended up making $25,000 in advertising sales, but I had $28,000 in savings, which was a lot 15 years ago. It's a lot now, but it was a lot more then.
Yeah.
And I figured 25 grand to cover the shortfall, $3,000 working capital. Next edition, because I figured the next edition, it would be so good that everyone would want to advertise. Second edition, I think we made something like it was, we were 12 shy. We were 12 shy. So did I get this right? The first edition, we were 25 shy. I think we made like 15 grand in advertising sales or something. The second one, it was like 28 grand in advertising sales, and we were like 12 grand shy. And Visa sent me a credit card offer, $15,000 credit card offer. And I went, great. And that was the second edition. It was like 12 grand to cover the shortfall, $3,000 working capital. Third edition broke even. Fourth edition made some money. But, it's not like other ventures that had mountains of cash, like that, these reserves, or like a war chest. Always had to do things the cheapskate way.
Yeah.
And a return on investment when selling any particular product or service, whether that return on investment is money or joy, it's super, super important. And there's another side to this as well too, which is worthwhile mentioning in the context of finance, is that a lot of people spend a lot of time focusing on the return on investment and not enough time thinking about the cost of inaction. So ROI and COI. ROI is when, you do something, you spend $2,000 on something, you make $4,000 back. But, and as you mentioned, a lot of our training is very, very practical. So we do things in the cheapest way. We help people get hopefully a nice big fat ROI fairly quickly. But then there's the COI, and that there is, if I bring it back to those early days with the magazine, I remember the first edition. So that's right. It was $40,000 to produce, $40,000. And we sold 15 grand's worth of advertising, 25 grand shortfall, 28 grand in savings. And there was a moment where I had to decide whether I was going to spend that money or not to get the first edition off the ground. And my father-in-law, who denies saying this, because it's been up and down like any business owner since then, is that he denies saying this, but he said, well, James, I'm sure you can make that $28,000 back, reasonably quickly if you just go back and get a day job. save it up because I was young. I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
But if you don't do it, you'll probably always regret it. And that was the cost of inaction.
Right.
And he's absolutely right, because if I hadn't done it, I'd probably be still working in some other job. I probably wouldn't nearly be as satisfied in my life. I love what I do. I love the people that I work with. I love the various ventures that I've run. It hasn't always been easy, but it's not been boring.
Yeah. Actually, I actually wanted to touch on that a bit. What was in your mind in that point in time, just before the first edition, they were having to spend that money too, and what happened once you got a bit of traction there? Did it get easier, or?
Well, and the first one, and this is the interesting way entrepreneurs think. That first business venture, Anthill magazine, that was Australia's first magazine for entrepreneurs and startups and innovators. There hadn't been a magazine like that before. At the time, people say, wow, that was really, really risky. I remember on about the 4th or 5th edition, because magazines are so expensive and it takes so long to get paid, I had to get a $100,000 overdraft. And then about a year later, I raised money from private investors. We ended up raising about $700,000 as the business grew and grew and grew.
Yeah.
And all of those things, every single step of the way, people are how did you deal with that? That's, the pressure. That's really, really terrifying. But what I think is that people say that entrepreneurs are risk takers. I actually don't think that entrepreneurs are risk takers at all. I just think that they're better at analyzing the risks. So my father-in-law had basically said, well, you can always make that $28,000 back. So that was the risk. And at the time it was didn't seem like that big a risk. Whereas other people hold it close.
Yeah.
And it's interesting as the world enters a recession, and maybe we'll come back to this, but people's attitudes towards money right now is very unusual. Because people are using the R word. But at the time, it didn't seem like such a big deal. Then as I said, just as the second edition, I had to get the second edition up. I was short on money. I get a letter from Visa. I don't know. There's these entrepreneurial gods. I don't know who they are, but maybe they intervened at that exact moment. And I think it's probably because maybe once again entrepreneurs are just better at seeing things, seeing opportunities. I can use that. So anyway, people said, "Oh, wasn't that risky?" And I'm like, "Oh, what? End up with a $15,000 credit card? Not really." And then by the time we're talking about $100,000 overdraft, I'm on my 6th edition by then, and the magazines are going out. I think I'd won an award. Competitors were suddenly watching, and I was like, "Well, you know what? This is like an MBA. $100,000 is like paying for an MBA, but at the end of an MBA, you're not guaranteed a job." I basically knew that every major publishing brand was going to want to hire me after what I'd achieved. So suddenly the $100,000 didn't seem such a big a deal. So I don't think entrepreneurs are very much risk takers. I think that they're just better at looking at things and going, you know what? Well, what's the worst case scenario? If this happens, I'll do that. Or if that happens, I'll just do that. I was really fortunate enough a couple of years back to meet and interview James Dyson, the vacuum cleaner guy.
Yeah.
He's a multi-billionaire. And it took him 11 years to sell one vacuum cleaner.
Wow.
11 years. And I said, how did you mentally deal with that? And he went, well, the worst case scenario, James, is that I'd end up washing dishes. Now, finding some job, and, paying his bills, washing dishes. Now, in his world, he was an industrial designer. So his worst case scenario is that he'd go back to his day job being an industrial designer. And during those 11 years, he maintained his job at a role, working at different companies, working for himself as an industrial designer. That was his version of washing dishes. Yeah. And so each of us, what's the worst case scenario? You'll end up washing dishes, you know. And I had another friend, a mentor, and he went. He was out in the wilderness for a while, Alan, and he ended up cleaning offices in the middle of the night. You know, he had a big empire. It all fell apart, and he ended up cleaning offices in the middle of the night before he could regrow it.
Yeah.
And then, you know, my favorite backup plan for entrepreneurs at the moment is driving Ubers.
I was about to say Uber.
What are you doing? I'm launching my business, but you know, whatever. Yeah. So the downside is never as bad as you think it's going to be.
Yeah.
And Josh, I don't know if you know this, but when my business crashed, 2009, when the bottom fell out of the print magazine market, on my balance sheet, we owed $988,000 in money. That's what we had. It was 12 grand shy of $1 million in debt.
Wow.
And I had no way of, no assets, no proven business model. And I rolled up my sleeves and over the next 3 years paid off $1 million worth of debt, relaunched the business. And the first business took 5 years to build and then crashed. Second business took 3 years to build to make some money. Then the bottom fell out of the digital advertising market. Third business took about 30 days, you know?
Wow.
Yeah, the training business was about 30 days. It was 5 days to make $47. It was 30 days to make $1,000 in a day. It was 3 months to make $4,000 in a day. And it was about the fifth month where we had a day where we made $43,000 in a day. And that's, with each step we keep learning, which is another one of my notes that I had in here. Josh?
Yes.
About big lessons.
The missing notes.
The missing notes. Yeah. I wrote notes for this and then lost the notes. But if we're talking about investing, and I'm sure some of your other people have said this, bit of a cliche, but if you're going to invest in anything, invest in yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. Invest in yourself.
Yeah, look, that's great. I mean, there's so much in there. Thanks for going into your experience and kind of what you're experiencing at the time, though. But I love how you kind of outlined that it's like that exponential growth in your learning from those businesses. That by the time you got to the third one, you had that experience behind you to know what to do there. And I know there's plenty of stories about other entrepreneurs who've done that as well. So for those who are watching, look at that. What's the worst that can happen? I think that's a really good point to touch on and really look at. If you have to go washing dishes, so be it. But if you've got the dream and you want to step out there and do it, like go and do it. I love it.
My mum has a saying. She says this word fear, F-E-A-R, stands for false evidence appearing real.
Yeah.
And there's just so many times where people will go, but what if? But what if? But what if? And you go, well, this will happen. And that's part of our training. You'd know this in our training programs. We have these RFA challenges, ready, fire, aim. Not ready, aim, fire, ready, fire, aim, because people ready, aim, and never ever fire. So we have these RFA challenges, ready, fire, aim. And we get our clients and students to do things because getting things started is more important than getting them perfect. And they always say, but what if? But what if? And we go, well, what if my ebook is not very good? Well, you know what? The first ebook that you ever produce is going to be the worst ebook.
Yeah.
I remember, Josh, your first logo. Can you remember your first logos?
Yeah, it's pretty nasty.
Yeah, your first logos. They were terrible. Yeah.
I hope my designer isn't listening.
Yeah. But, you got them out there. You launched the business with an ugly logo.
Yeah, that's right. Make things happen. I love it.
Make things happen.
That's great. Now, you kind of touched on some mentors there before, and that's a question I've been asking people too. Is there any other kind of key mentors where you kind of saw that ready, fire, aim model, like modeled to you?
Oh, all the time. All the time. I mean, like, it's everywhere. The moment that you see it, it's everywhere. I tell you what, there's a guy called Ryan Levesque who does a pretty good training program called the Ask Method. And he has a very similar saying to that. And Grace Lever does as well too. But it's just one of those things, like, people that do get a result. I'll tell you a really interesting study where what they did is you'll love this. They got a bunch of kids in one room and they gave them spaghetti sticks and a couple other things, spaghetti sticks, sticky tape, some other things. And they basically said, we want you to create towers. See how high you can make these towers. And they gave them 5 minutes. And then in another room, they had a bunch of management consultants. And they gave the management consultants the spaghetti sticks and the glue and the sticky tape and all these other things. And so in one room, you had like 10-year-olds. In the other room, you had like management consultants. And who do you think ended up producing the tallest tower?
The kids.
The kids. And the reason why is right from the outset, they just began experimenting. What if we try this? What if we try that? What if we try this? What if we try that? And it was just this constant, iterations on what they tried before. Whereas like the management consultants were whiteboarding and coming up with different ideas of what would make a better tower and all this other stuff, where the kids in the other room were just building it. It would crash, build it, crash, build it, crash, build it, crash. So when you know it, you begin to see this stuff everywhere. You look at the story of Steve Jobs. It's just a series of mistakes. And then he reinvents the media industry and all this other stuff. Yeah. But one thing that I do know is that when I'm working with a customer or a client, if I can get them a win quickly, talking about return on investment and cost of inaction, if I can get them a win quickly, they're going to stick around.
Yeah.
And that usually comes from a bit of experimentation. I'll tell you one mentor that does pop into my mind, someone who is not particularly well known. Is a guy called Dan Norris. And I've spoken at a couple of events where he was a speaker. And to be completely honest, I don't know what he's done from an entrepreneurial perspective, but he produced a book, tiny, flimsy little book called Create or Hate. And I'm going to recommend anyone watching this to jump onto Amazon and buy Create or Hate for like $3, for like $2. It's this tiny little book. And I bought it on Amazon. I read it in 2 hours, not even that. I then went and bought about 100 copies of this book and ended up giving it to clients and students, because it was really around this idea is that there are people out there that are constantly knocking what everyone else is doing. And as a result, they never end up creating themselves. And when they don't create, they don't make progress. And the more that they criticize others, the harder it becomes for them to create, because they can't produce anything unless it's perfect. Because they see how other people are going to react. But if you're just creating all the time, like this virtual summit that you're doing, Josh, is that what you're calling it, a virtual summit?
Yeah, virtual summit show. Yeah,
yep.
Massive, yeah.
You've never done anything like this before, and you're creating it. And with every interview, you get better at it, and and they're creating something that people are going to remember, they're going to love. I have that saying that, why is your favorite celebrity chef rich and famous? Have you heard me say this one?
Yeah.
Why is your favorite celebrity chef rich and famous? Are you gonna give me the answer?
I'm gonna leave it in suspense.
Leave it in suspense, because they give away all their recipes. They give away all their recipes 24/7, 7 days a week, and then you go and you buy their branded saucepans and their cookbooks and go to their restaurants and pay them to cater your events. Whereas everyone else is basically saying the margin is in the mystery. If I don't tell anyone how I do what I do, I'll be able to charge more. When every mystery is now available as a 5-minute YouTube clip.
That's true. That's true.
Be the cure. Be generous.
Yeah.
Educate.
Yeah. That's great. I love it. Now,
Mm.
one question I've been asking the audience, or asking my interviewers for the audience, is around the mindset, how we're thinking about these different areas. And I love seeing kind of how the entrepreneurial mindset intersects with what we do with our finances. So if I could ask you that question, what's the one thing that's made the key difference in your entrepreneurial mindset? And it could be the cure, but let's do something else. and your financial mindset, your financial world there too. I'd love to delve into those two areas.
Well, from a finance perspective, there are three rules that took me a long time to figure out, and one is pay yourself first, and that's just because well, firstly for me, when the bottom fell out of the print magazine market, I was in dire straits. And I'm not talking about the band or Mark Knopfler. No, I was talking about money, dire straits. Pay yourself first. And it's very easy to be thinking as a business owner, an exit is going to come one day when I sell this business, and that's going to be like, the day where I'm going to get rich. It's very rare that a business will grow to a point and exit on a stock exchange or a trade sale. Money is made from a business while the business is operating. So pay yourself first. Take money out and then invest it in all those traditional ways that everyone else talks about and everybody else does. If you're a salaried employee, you're going to put it in your super or your 401k. Pay yourself first. Invest in shares. Invest in real estate. Pay yourself first. The second piece of advice is pay the tax department second. Pay the ATO. That's the Australian Taxation Office, or pay the the tax man, the revenue, whatever it's called in the US, the revenue department, internal revenue.
IRS, the IRS.
IRS, there we go. Internal Revenue Service. Pay them second. Pay yourself first and pay them second. Now, if you're savvy, you can pay yourself first while also paying the IRS. And a simple way to do that, and I wouldn't be surprised if another entrepreneur has said this, is that make sure that every week or every month you pay your tax into something like your own share portfolio or your own overdraft for the home that you have, which means that you'll be paying less interest on the home, or you'll be generating interest from
your offset account for Australians who've got
an offset account for the Australians. That's what they would know it as. So basically, if you own a house, right, and you own $1 million house, and you owe $500,000 on a mortgage, and you've got 50 grand that you owe that you have to pay the tax department every month, or it's every quarter that you need to pay them. That's $150,000 of interest that you're not paying on in any given year. So pay yourself first, but pay the ATO second, and you can have your cake and eat it too. What I will say is that if you're not setting aside money for the ATO, that is probably the most common way the IRS or the ATO, that is the most common way that I've seen entrepreneurs shoot themselves in the foot.
Wow.
It's just again and again and again. And I've been there. I've sailed, close to the wind, come very close. I've had very long conversations with the ATO at times because I didn't do that. So pay yourself first, pay the ATO second, and of course invest in yourself. Those would be the three big rules. Investing in yourself, because people invest in, they spend money on a fancy car, and you probably need a car to get around. But you know what? That car is just going to depreciate in value. Whereas when you're investing in yourself, that's going to increase in value. Yeah. From a tactical perspective, and this is going to come way out of left field here, that's just because I am a sales and marketing guy, is that what I will say is from building a business, is that in terms of advice or things that I've stumbled across that made the big difference, is know your own magic numbers within the business. Know your own magic numbers. And I'll give you an example of that. So for example, if a client, okay, straight off the bat, how much is a client worth or a customer? How much is a client worth in the first month? How much is a client worth according to the lifetime value? How much is the profit that you're going to make on a product? You know, what is the COGS, the cost of goods sold, or something like that? But you got to know, you got to know your magic numbers. So, for example, how much is a client worth in the first month, and in the first year? Lifetime value of a client. Next, how much money are you willing to sacrifice to acquire that customer or client? So, for example, it might well be that you're willing to sacrifice the first month of income or the first month of profit to acquire that client. So if you're working in a service-based industry, it might be that you sacrifice the first month. If you're working in like a product industry, it might be, how much margin are you willing to give up on the first sale? If you're in a SaaS business, it might be how many months of revenue are you willing to give up? For example, like HubSpot sacrifices 18 months worth of revenue to get one customer or client. And HubSpot, which is about $1,000 a month. So talking about they sacrifice 18 grand to acquire one client.
Wow.
So how much is a customer worth in the first month, in the lifetime? How much are you willing to sacrifice of that revenue or that profit to acquire that customer? Because then if you know that, you can start to do some more detailed metrics and go, well, if it takes 4 meetings to acquire one client and I'm willing to sacrifice $1,000 to acquire one client, therefore I'm willing to pay $250 to get a meeting. Then you might say, well, it's going to cost 50 leads to get one meeting. So therefore I'm willing to sacrifice $5 to get one lead. $5 times 250 is, divided by whatever, works out to be 50 leads times $5 is $250, which is how much you're paying to get that one meeting.
Yeah.
And those are called your magic numbers. And when you know those are your magic numbers, that is when a business can go whoosh. That is when a business can truly scale. And if we bring this back to some of the earlier themes, that's when we can invest in sales and marketing without suffering from cash confidence, a lack of cash confidence. I can't invest in my business because I don't know what I'm going to get in return. But if you know that if it's $5 a lead, gets you 4 meetings. $5 a lead will get you 1 meeting. 4 meetings will get you 1 client. And, you're willing to sacrifice $1,000, you can do the maths.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Well, yeah, that's great that you've outlined those things there. I really like the focus there on your top 3 with finance there, and then into really working out what is the cost for your client too. And I know like a big theme of yours and from doing your training, that focus on cost of inaction is such a huge deal that people just don't think about, not just in business, but across their money management, investing in themselves, but also investing in assets and things that are going to create passive income for them in the future as well. Now, I know you have something to share with the audience for free, a free gift. I'll be putting the link in the show notes in the video for everyone watching as well. But tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I've got a little Excel spreadsheet tool that I use, a little calculator, and this will help people figure out their own magic numbers. So, for example, if you know how much money you want to bring in any given month, and how much a client is worth, you can figure out how many clients you're going to need to bring in to achieve that, and then how many meetings you might need to achieve that, and then how many leads you might need to achieve that, how much of this income you want to sacrifice for the purpose of marketing. And it breaks it all down. So you can look at your numbers and basically go, okay, well, I can spend up to $170 to get a meeting, or I can spend $800 to get a meeting. And all you need to do is put in some basic numbers, and it will hopefully spit out some magic numbers for you. And you can say, okay, well, I can spend $12 on a lead on Facebook to get an outcome that I want to get.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that there is we call it our B2B funnel mapping calculator, something like that. But it doesn't matter whether you're in B2B or not. But if you are working in an industry where there are steps to a sale, which is pretty much just about every industry these days, you can have a quick look at it. You might want to change it up for yourself, and you might want to say, okay, well, I need to get this much traffic to get this many people buying on my website, whatever it's going to be. But if you sell a complex product or service, it usually comes down to the value of a client, how many clients you got, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we'll put that out to your audience for that. Thanks, James, for being on the show. I just love some of those key areas you touched on being the cure and really focusing on that cost of inaction as well. That's just going to be a huge value to everyone watching. So viewers, stay tuned. We've got more content coming up, more interviews, just hitting these different areas of your business in the financial world, so you can pull it all together and really accelerate what's happening for you. So, James, once again, thanks for being with us on the show.
My absolute pleasure. I'm so thrilled to see you creating because you are indeed becoming, if you're not already, the master chef, the celebrity chef, the personal finance space. Fantastic.
Great. Thanks again, James.
Bye. See ya.